This is Jamie Drummond for Good Food Revolution. I am here with Grant MacPherson, a Prairie Boy on College Street. How are you today, sir?
I'm well, yourself?
Very good, thank you. Now, the very last time we saw you on Good Food Revolution was many a year ago, and you were up to your elbows in the dirt up in Meaford, where you were harvesting vegetables.
Yeah, we were organic farming up in Meaford, which is up near Georgian Bay. We spent about 3 seasons growing organic vegetables, tomatoes predominantly of an heirloom variety, but lots of other stuff.
And what was it that drew you towards bread? Because today we find you elbow deep in dough, basically.
Well, it's an extension of the same thing to me. The passion for local agriculture, high quality food, and organics. So we've taken our love of organic farming and Ontario food production and the local food system and transferred it into this. I've always been a huge fan of bread, and I've been a chef for most of my life. So this is actually a little closer to what I've always done. And my favorite meal in the entire world is a perfectly baked loaf of bread, still touched warm with a little bit of fresh, high-quality butter on it. It's one of the best food experiences you can possibly have. So it's a natural expression for me of the things I truly love in food.
And what makes Prairie Boy so special? What's so particular about the breads that you make here?
The big things that make us different are the method we have and the fact that we are 100% organic, grown, milled, and baked right here in Ontario.
And what are the positive aspects of that and the challenges?
The biggest positive aspect for us of using local Ontario flour is the flavor. Because it's freshly milled, grown here, it's really distinctive. It has all the nuances of the essential oils, distinctive different varieties that are not common across the rest of Canada. So you can really coax a lot of unique flavors and characters and really do something unique with the bread. The other big advantages are, of course, the environmental impact and sustainability.
Of course.
By purchasing our grain organically and locally, we are helping ensure that there is the availability of good quality food for future generations, my son, yours, and everybody else's, and even for ourselves in 20 years' time. Because if we fail to support the local food system, then it will disappear. It will just get eaten up by larger operations. The milling that's going on in Ontario right now is really fantastic. There are a couple of small millers that we use that are doing really great distinctive work. We're using Arva Mills flour, which is one of the oldest operating flour mills in the country, established in 1819, so they're coming up on a very important anniversary for them. They do our organic Ontario white flours, and we have on the opposite end of the spectrum the stone ground flours that we get from the Hoffnung Mennonite Collective. This is planted and harvested by horse-drawn equipment, milled in a mill with no electricity. It's the lowest carbon footprint, and it is a beautiful tasting flour with great baking characteristics. And then our super high-tech, ultra-passionate miller, Mark Hayhoe of K2 Milling, who has this modern flail mill and is doing all kinds of amazing things with locally farmed wheats and other grains. He makes this beautiful bread flour that he calls the Frederick. It's a red wheat, red spring wheat, and it has great baking properties and beautiful flavors to it. It's also, he's doing all of our cracked grains. We have many different types of whole grains that he's bringing in for us. He's also started malting and stuff. It's very exciting what's going on in the farming and milling communities here in Canada and in Ontario in particular. And we're really glad to be a part of it. And we feel that it's really important to support that, because otherwise all our bread just ends up tasting the same, and our whole way of feeding ourselves is dependent on a handful of large corporations and their goodwill towards us to be able to feed ourselves, especially if things start to move a little strange climate-wise. Our local food system may be able to adapt. A giant, overweight, heavy food system will not.
That's a good point there. And the challenges of having such a self-made mandate.
Well, the first challenge right off the hop is obviously the cost. It's at least twice as much per kilo to buy flour locally Ontario milled and grown as it is to bring it in off the prairies. The economy of scale for milling is just one of those things.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
It is massive. So Mark's beautiful little mill up in Beaton, Ontario makes fantastic wheat, but it is a much more expensive proposal to do it small here in Ontario than just do it in a giant mill in the middle of Saskatchewan. The other thing that makes it tricky is that it requires you to have a better baker. It is constantly changing from season to season, but also from week to week. Our flour gets milled fresh every week, so what it bakes like on a Wednesday when it comes in is different than what it's baking up like on the Monday of the next week.
Wow.
So over the course of 7 to 10 days, the flour goes through quite a bit of changes that requires us to constantly be monitoring and adapting how we bake. So we're taking the grain from the soil and having to adapt ourselves to it, as opposed to the paradigm that says, this is what we want to eat and we're going to make nature do what we want it to do.
What kind of yeasts are you using to prove all of the bread here?
Well, we're a purely sourdough bakery, so this is
see.
wild yeasts and wild lactobacillus bacteria. And each area of the world and each terroir, it grows distinctively. Our mother started off of some rye flour from the Hoffnung Mennonite Collective, and just a little bit of rye flour and water, and you get yourself yeast and bacteria growing in less than 48 hours. And we feed it with our local Ontario wheat, their Toronto supply of tap water, and it lives here at the bakery. So it's its own thing, it's its own culture. And culture is the right term because there are millions and millions of little creatures in a small bucket of that. And it has its own life expectancy, and one of our biggest tasks here to make great bread is to keeping the mother happy, because if she's unhappy, everything else goes bad, and if she's great, it's actually not too difficult to make everything else work.
How many different types of bread do you make here at Prairie Boy now?
Well, we have our big four. We have our country white, our double fermented multigrain, the Winnipeg rye, and the 20th century flax. As also, we do a baguette, and then we do a bread of the day to highlight different distinctive local Niagara fruits or fermented or sprouted grains and stuff throughout the season. These change up as the season moves and throughout the week to just kind of give some variety. But it's those first 5 that are the primary bulk of what we do.
You were saying it took quite some time to get your baguette recipe in order.
Well, baguette's a tricky one because it has some baker's yeast in it. So when you are trying to balance what you want in a bread to be, and you're using natural ingredients to get a thin crust and to get the character you want and the flavor and the mouthfeel and the crumb, it just takes a lot of practicing and many, many variations of it before you get to what you really want. So if you're dedicated, you'll get there. But it does take quite a long time to work those things out.
And how many days a week are you open at College Street?
We're 7 days a week. We close on stat holidays. That's about it. So we're going full bore, and the crew and myself are here most days. So.
What time does that mean you have to get up in the morning?
Well, for those of us who are doing the bake, we start out at 1.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah, it's an early morning. We call it morning. Some people call it a night job, but we call it early morning. But we've got it split up, so none of us are here too many days of the week doing that. Most of the rest of the time, we're starting at a fairly reasonable 6 in the morning. It's still an early world, but it's also nice, especially as we roll back into summer, to be done your workday at 2 or 3 in the afternoon. It's a beautiful thing as well.
It's quite the antithesis of the way you used to work with when you were working in restaurants and the like.
Yeah, it's kind of the inverse of the restaurant life. As a chef, you are going to work at 3 or 4 in the afternoon and getting home in the middle of the night. So it's a nice change, and it allows me to be more involved with my family and with the community. And that's really what Prairie Boy is all about, is the community and how the community is all about food. And to go back to that very word companionship, the breaking bread, that's what companionship means, is to break bread with somebody. So our greatest goal here is to help bring people together as a community around food and all the great things that happen when food is local and organic and nutritious and incredibly tasty.
Fantastic. Grant, thank you very much for your hospitality today.
A pleasure. Good to see you again.
Take care.